Hello and welcome to Celestial You. Today we're going to be going over the solar eclipse, which is happening on October 14th and whose effects will last until April of 2024. So that's why it's so important. Eclipses tend to rock our world and make big shifts. Today I'm going to be going over what's going to happen with the eclipse in the US, geopolitically, and the energies thereof. And then I'm going to go over what's happening on the world stage. And then after that, I'll tie it into what's happening personally. So stay tuned. So first off, the eclipse is, the solar eclipse in particular, is when from the vantage point of the Earth, you can't see the sun because the moon is blocking the sun. And it's during this time, this happens along the axis of the nodes, so the north and south nodes. So it's a time when the tone is set in terms of how we're moving forward, because the solar eclipses speak to how we're aligning with our soul and how we're moving forward with things in life. And that tone is set now for up until April of next year, as to what the themes are going to be and how your life is going to shift and change with every new moon. That is detailed by this eclipse. So let's get into it. The solar eclipse, as calculated from Philadelphia, is going to happen on October 14th at 13:55 or 1:55 p.m. And that is just when exactly the moon and the sun are aligned. And during this eclipse, the prominent feature here is that the planet Mercury is also in the house of Libra. This whole eclipse is happening in Libra. And in Libra, when an eclipse happens, it's setting the tone for how we, as a society, can get along with other people, because Libra is the other. And in particular, this chart, the Lagna, or the ascendant for this US chart of this eclipse, is in Capricorn. And so the Capricornian energy of this eclipse relates to government, and it relates to authority, and it relates to the organization, the structures and functions of the US, right? And the very prominent feature that I immediately see in this chart is that Pluto is in Capricorn. And so it's in that ascendant house. So there's a real shift in the identity of the US at this point in time. And you can see that there's more things that are being exposed in this next 6 months. We've already seen many things come out, in particular because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is in Pisces, which is also another sign of government, but it has to do with government secrets. We are seeing a lot of the secrets come out, and particularly to Pisces has to do with healthcare. And so it has to do with health, mental health, and we're going to be seeing quite a few revelations thereof. You can also see revelations with regards to secrets or mysteries that we didn't quite understand before. And a lot of that is being unearthed because Pluto is in Capricorn. And so the tone of this eclipse is still revelations thereof. In addition, Saturn is sitting on the second cusp here. And so the revelations that are coming about have to do with cash flow, finances, and things like that. So, there was this idea this rosy idea that the US was very financially sound. And I think over the next 6 months, we're going to be finding out that with the rising inflation that we've experienced, and with Saturn moving through Pisces, particularly on this cusp, that there will be issues with cash flow within the nation. And so that's going to be less secure. It's kind of like we're seeing the bubble pop. So if there was a bubble related to assets, particularly land assets and things, I'm thinking of corporate real estate, we're going to start seeing these bubbles pop. Because when Saturn's in Pisces, it tends to bring truth to our illusions. And so if there was this illusion about our financial situation, that's now going to be popping. Another thing that I see in this chart is that the North Node is in Aries. So that has been happening for a while now. And since this summer, and that brings about this war energy we've all experienced lately, and the fact that the US is involved in wars. But over the next 6 months or up until April, the energy of that, because Mars is in Scorpio, is that it's not an overt leader in these wars, it's a covert operation in these wars. But oddly enough, because this Rahu rests on the third cusp is communication, media, that kind of thing. They're waging a war on communication covertly, which I don't know if you've noticed this, but there has been attempts to hijack freedom of speech in this country, which, to the founders of this country would have been a war, right? And so there's Mars being in Scorpio. It's actually on sharing the 10th and 11th cusp, so the social networks. There are obstacles to that. There's abuses because it's in Scorpio. And really, we are facing a war in the US, but we're actually facing a cyber war, or a social media war. And that is pretty clear as one who lives here. Now, in terms of Libra, where the actual eclipse is happening, it is happening alongside Mercury. And that's important because the planets next to the eclipse give the thematic flavor of that eclipse, if you will. And so with Mercury in Libra, we're really talking about legalities here. And particularly too within this chart in the US, it's all about the legal system as I see it, okay? Because Mercury is law and titles and written declarations, those kinds of communications. And so when we look at that being a part of the eclipse, that means that there's maybe an imbalance with this, and the eclipse, after the eclipse, there's the scales of justice rebalancing. And so particularly when I looked at this, the planet Mercury connected to the 6th house. So there are delays to justice with regard to the judicial system, but it's speaking of Mercury because it also rules Virgo, and Virgo holds the 8th cusp and the 9th house. That is very much dealing with changes and battles with regard to the organization of our lives with regards to altruism, but in particular because these are legal battles with regards to these issues. Particularly Virgo, legal battles with our health. So this is probably about health autonomy. That's the way I see it, especially because Venus is in the house of Virgo here, and Venus is the healer, and it's on the 8th cusp. So really Venus or healing or rest, because it's also in debilitation, is difficult to do. And the reason why we have these legalities is because people are kind of fighting back on some of maybe the detrimental side effects for certain treatments that were released in the last few years. And maybe they were unlawfully mandated to take them. And as a result of this, there are now probably, and I know there are a litany of lawsuits fighting back against things that happened regarding mandates, treatments for certain viruses, that kind of thing. And so as we see Pluto reshaping Capricorn, it's outing a lot of this stuff, that maybe they weren't exposing before. And now it's really the judicial branch of the US government that is correcting for a lot of this. In addition, we see that Jupiter is still in Taurus. So there's still this immense feeling in the US that we're looking for security, financial security, assets. And there's a lot of yo-yoing, or there's a lot of sudden changes with that picture. And particularly folks are feeling that within their emotional happiness, that they don't feel as secure, and and Uranus is also in this house, so it's creating some rapid shifts, changes within our securities. So that's also a difficulty with this solar eclipse in Libra, and particularly because Jupiter tends to expand anything that's there, right? And normally that would mean that Jupiter is expanding our voice, because Taurus is the voice of truth. But there's sort of a cyber war against that at this time. And so you can clearly see over the next 6 months that continues, because Mars, which is in Scorpio, is illustrating all these obstacles to our networking. Those obstacles are also, it also illustrates that there's really still a lack of leadership or clear leadership for the US. And, Mars in Scorpio shows still covert leadership. And so it doesn't show forthright or maybe even honest leadership. It just shows like power struggles. And that's sort of been the tone we've had in the US, but that continues with this solar eclipse in the US. Okay, and I'm also going to go over now the solar eclipse as it relates to the whole world. And that is when we cast a chart for the solar eclipse at Yamakoti, which is the point that we use to calculate whole world effects, essentially. And so for Yamakoti, the solar eclipse in Libra is in the first house. And what this means for Yamakoti is that the next 6 months in the world are all about justice, the pursuit of peace, the pursuit of harmony. And because Mercury is paired up with this eclipse, Mercury's at 17 degrees and the eclipse is at 21 degrees or so quite close. And what that means is that during this time throughout the world, we are going to be asking the question is who are our friends? And based off of that, because Mercury represents barriers on a global geopolitical scale, that's going to be talking about the justice of our borders. And we've already seen a little bit of that come into play in the recent week because of the Israel-Palestine conflicts, but that's just going to be pervasive in the next 6 months. And the reason why we know this is about land is because we also see that there's a bit of a land grab going on the world stage. And that's because Mars is in the second house, and that's in Scorpio. And so there's kind of like covert land grabs going on, and there's politics involved with that, or power struggles, because Scorpio is mysterious power struggles. And particularly Scorpio can also be, with Mars there, overcoming obstacles to even what we would consider to be crime obstacles. So that's happening. And in the second house, it has to do with the stability of the nation. So there could be blows to the stability of the nation. Particularly Mars is land in the second house. So I do see these land struggles or land grabs happening throughout, particularly with the North Node being in Aries, that does have a war-like energy. And what we see on the world stage essentially is people feeling insecure because they don't have assets, because they don't have land. They don't own land, they don't feel secure, so they're quite literally trying to grab someone else's money, right? Someone else's land to make them feel good about themselves or secure about themselves. But on a whole, the people of the world, while we see this happening, the push is actually for harmony. It's Libra. And Venus is in Virgo. So while there are these land grabs happening and these conflicts, the people of the earth are concerned with altruism. They're concerned with doing the right thing, having that heart energy, having that healing energy. And particularly in the 12th house, they're concerned with recovery. They want to recover from all this stuff. They want to recover from COVID, because 12th house is also, chronic illness, and basically this has become a chronic illness. There's also talk at this time about, whether these treatments, because Venus is in the 12th house, that's like how you treat people, how you heal people. And Virgo is critical of that. Virgo's saying, did that really work? What you did it really work? Or potentially, if it didn't work, Libra in this eclipse is asking that we prosecute, that we take this to the law, that we take this to the judicial system, and let the judicial system say, hey, was that good or bad? Did that actually follow our rules and laws? And the reason why is because with Mercury there, it reinforces this idea that we need to have a good deal here. We need to have a fair deal for the populace in the world, right? And so there will be a lot of litigation going on, and in particular, because that litigation is us questioning the health system and us questioning the governance system, and seeing if it really meets our needs, particularly because Jupiter is in Taurus. So we as a populace are asking for laws and regulations that support our truth. Taurus is the truth. It's the throat. And Jupiter makes that expansive. And Jupiter's in the 8th house, so fighting for truth. There's fighting for truth in the court systems. I want to be able to say my truth. I don't want to be censored. I want to say whatever I need to say, right? And that's a battle right now. And that's going to continue to be a battle here. Particularly too, because the sun rules the 11th house, that's social networks. The moon rules the 10th house in this eclipse, and so that rules the governments. And so together, it's really this picture for the next 6 months. In addition, we see that Saturn is in the 6th house, so there is litigation going on, and a lot of this litigation, when Saturn passes through Pisces, is getting rid of the illusions and like getting back to the truth. So Saturn's like, nope, we can't be under these illusions. We actually need to be truthful about what's truly happening. Pisces is the government and secret stuff. We need to know what the truth is. And the 6th house represents delays in knowing what the truth is. You know, Neptune is also there, so there is this idea that we want the higher, the better information, you know, but we're having delays to that over the next 6 months. So on a global scale, the people are still wanting this, and yet they're still struggling with setting those long-term goals, and resolving conflicts, especially with regard to illusions that we had going on. And particularly too, what I see that Saturn in this chart rules the 5th house and the 4th house, the 4th house being happiness and inner happiness, and Pluto is there. And so on a world scale, this is the transformation of inner happiness by letting go of our illusions, of the goals we had and aspirations we had that were not practical, that were actually not going to happen. And in essence, the 6th house is working really hard at doing something about this. And so that's also happening on a world scale in terms of, and particularly too, the eclipse in Libra represents everybody evaluating, are these my friends or are these my frenemies? You know, so that's also happening on a world scale. But the desire of humanity is to create peace, to support peace. And for that, this chart shows that we recognize we need to change across humanity. And so that's a really good thing. These are serious times, but this is a very serious eclipse, which I think rises to that occasion and to the challenge. Okay, so who's personally going to be most affected by this eclipse? Well, it's in Libra. So Librans, people with sun in Libra, people sun, moon, rising, or other planets in Libra are going to feel the effects, particularly if whatever planets you have in Libra are going to be triggered by this eclipse. And you also want to look at the house position of where that falls for you. So, and in addition to that, if you're an Aries, which is the opposite sign to Libra, you're going to be affected by this. So, or if you have Aries positions. So if you have Libran positions, you're really going to feel the sense of injustice. and you're going to feel like you want to do something about it, and you're going to want to feel like you want to talk about it because Mercury is there. So personally, this is hitting you on a personal level and you want to communicate about it. Now, that's not easy because we're not living in a climate where we're allowed to say everything we feel at the moment. But nonetheless, we are feeling like we want to assert ourselves. If you have Libra placements, that's going to be on fire for you in the next 6 months. If you have Aries placements, it's going to feel like all the things that you're working towards are out of your reach. All the things that you want are out of your reach, and you're just having to keep compromising because it's really not about you. And that's difficult when you have Aries placements because you just want things to happen. And that's not the way it's going to be for the next 6 months because you have to contend for your relationships. And that's just how it's going to be for everybody involved, essentially. So remember to look at your placements in those signs. And so if you do have planets either in Aries or Libra, you are definitely going to be affected by this. The closer your planets are to the degree of the eclipse, which is at about 21 degrees of Libra, the more, and these are your birth planets, you're going to be affected. And so this, wherever that hits you is where it's going to affect that portion of your life and that planetary rulership of your life. So if you want to know more about how these shifts are going to affect you, you're welcome to get a reading and I can go into those details. But for now, hang on to your pants, everybody, because this solar eclipse is serious business. And for now, take care. Bye.